Hey folks, welcome back. This is Chris in central Pennsylvania. It's still chilly here, but the snow looks like it's melting just around the freezing temperature, slightly above that. You know, you don't have to be Nostradamus or senior fund on Ensborg to predict when South Africa's propaganda machine will gin up. So, Shelley Hepburn reported on some people having a less than desirable experience in Connecticut several weeks back, telling people about some of the bad experiences that refugee assistance case officers and agencies are delivering to some South African refugees, and she was right to do so. I was reticent to talk about it because I knew the propaganda machine would distort what's going on, and that's exactly what is happening. But you can't hide the truth, and so I also report on this, but I believe actually Shelley beat me to that because I was holding back on this, trying to verify these stories a little bit better from my own personal perspective. And having traveled to Rochester, New York, I can confirm that, in fact, this is a real situation. Having dealt with it in Modesto, California, in Austin, Texas, in Virginia, and in Michigan, among other places, as well as Rochester, I can attest that this is happening in a number of cases. However, this week, Madeline Rowley, who writes for the Free Press, wrote a story, and then she appeared on CBS morning program. And as reliable as the sun rising in the east and setting in the west, the fake stream legacy media in South Africa, the propaganda machine, has already started, completely missing the point of the story. The point of the story isn't that South African refugees are suffering. The point of the story is that there appears to be a lack of oversight of these agencies that rake in billions of dollars from the taxpayer to provide services to refugees here in America. That's the story. And that's what I believe the thesis for Maddie Rowley was all about. She talked to me as she prepared this story. She interviewed me. We discussed it. And I believe that was her intent. That's what I infer from her story. And that's certainly the angle that I'm pursuing here, and one I've been pursuing since before my trip to Rochester, and certainly since my trip to Rochester. There is a very serious concern here that this is a problem that's been continuing for some time, much like the story that broke in Minneapolis about the fraud tied to Laring centers and all the money scammed from the taxpayer, billions of dollars. This is another situation where these refugee assistance agencies make $2.9 billion a year. Their CEOs make $700,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year to get paid when the people that work for them are putting refugees, and not just South Africans, into hovels, into roach motels, into poor conditions. And it's true. I've spoken to non-South African refugees who received abysmal treatment in Rochester, among other places. So that's the story here. The story isn't that South Africans, the dream deferred, as the Independent Online says, the toilet paper record says that the dream deferred. Well, the American dream isn't deferred. I think a lot of people, regardless of the conditions they live in, are probably just grateful that they're not going to be murdered in their beds tomorrow morning coming to America. That is enough for some people. Having said that, everyone is entitled to reasonable accommodation when they come here. After all, the United States government has offered them succor to come to America, and you don't really feel safe if you're in an unpleasant place to live. No one should live in circumstances that are less than ideal. But the notion that these people, the dream deferred, because they're not living in palatial mansions, which is what is implied in the Times Live story, which, by the way, appears to have just simply copied what Maddie Rowley put out there. They didn't break a story. There's no original content, no analysis, no interjection, no input whatsoever. They simply taken the facts that she put out there from her investigation, and they just copied it and put it in their paper. They did attribute to her, so it's not plagiarism, but it's hardly original content. And then the story from the IOL saying that the American dream deferred, that's just nonsense. Now, to put Maddie Rowley's story in context, yes, there are a number of these cases, and my estimation is about 3%. Could be wrong. Maybe not everybody's having problems that's come forward, but I've spoken to 600-800 refugees, maybe more at this point, and it's about 3% of the people that I'm running into this issue. Now, the number will increase as more and more South Africans come here if they continue to be sent to refugee assistance agencies who refuse to do their job. Now, here's another scoop, if you want to call it that. Not what I'm reporting as a scoop, because Shelley Hepburn's report on it, I've reported on it, and now Maddie Rowley for the Free Press. But here's the scoop. This is an issue that people aren't really talking about. More and more of these refugees are coming, and agencies are lying to them, telling them there's no money, that Trump cut the benefits. This is BS. also trying to force them out of the program in less than 30 days, saying there's no money to support you. That's fiction. The only major change in the program, financially, was the elimination of SNAP benefits. But that was done by Congress and signed by Trump into law. And even that's strange. Some people apparently are still getting them, others aren't getting them, so I don't know what the story is there, other than it was supposed to end October 1st, 2025. Well, the bottom line here, ladies and gentlemen, is that the propaganda machine has ginned up. Just as I predicted, again, it didn't take a rocket scientist to make that prediction. The moment that negative stories come out about this program, that is what they'll tell you. But these are the same people who today, 1 year after the program was created, tell you that this is a white supremacist program, that it is for white Afrikaans-speaking farmers and nobody else. It's a lie. It's a lie. It is for Afrikaners and racial minorities suffering from unjust racial persecution, and that has been the case since the 10th of February last year, which I predicted. There you go. Anyway, take it for what you want, folks, but if you're still reading and listening to legacy media in South Africa, well, maybe you need to look around, because they're not your friend, and they don't want to tell you the truth. The story here is not mistreatment of South African refugees, because as I've uncovered, it's mistreatment of refugees by companies that are supposed to be faith-based organizations for the most part, not all of them, who are making a fortune off the taxpayer, some of whom are failing to deliver services. And I have to be clear about this. Some of these organizations are delivering great services in one location, like Church World Service, fantastic in Tampa, fantastic in Dallas. Heard it universally from every refugee I talk to, independently. I've been to Dallas, and I know people in Tampa who've received their services. But at the same time, Church World Services is responsible for refugees in Rochester, New York, and what's happened there is a disgrace. So take it for what you want, but you'll always get the truth here. Accurate, cogent, insightful analysis. Thanks a lot, folks. Have a good day. Take care of yourselves, and